Keir Starmer's position is clearly untenable, but it is for Labour MPs to decide when he goes, because it is a question of when, not if, he goes. Just now, Keir Starmer has given a speech supposedly about local funding and integration, no doubt another mission or pledge or milestone that was made up by an aide yesterday afternoon, yet another relaunch that in a week's time no one will remember. And he apologised for believing Mandelson's lies. That's not good enough. What he should apologise for is ignoring security advice and vetting that showed him Mandelson should never have been appointed in the first place.
Right, so picture this. It's late at night in Downing Street, the lights are on, tensions are high, and you'd think the Prime Minister would be knee-deep in NATO strategy documents or wrestling with Britain's energy crisis, yeah? Wrong. According to Kemi Badenoch, Keir Starmer was doing what he apparently does best lately, desperately ringing around Labour MPs like he's trying to organise a last-minute rescue mission for his own political career. And honestly, the absolute scenes. Welcome back to Brit Article, where we dissect British politics with the chaos it deserves. I'm about to walk you through one of the spiciest parliamentary moments we've had in weeks, and trust me, you do not want to miss this. But before we dive into the carnage, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because British politics waits for no one, and neither should you. So, let's set the stage, shall we? Kemi Badenoch, Conservative Party leader, professional dismantler of weak arguments, and someone who clearly woke up and chose violence, absolutely eviscerated Keir Starmer over his handling of the Peter Mandelson scandal. And when I say eviscerated, I don't mean a polite parliamentary, I disagree with the right honourable gentleman. No. This was a full-blown political autopsy performed live in Westminster, and Starmer was the unfortunate patient on the table. Badenoch stood up in Westminster and dropped what can only be described as a political bomb. She declared, and I quote, "Britain is not being governed." Not Britain is being governed poorly, not Britain could be governed better. No, she went straight for the jugular with Britain is not being governed. That's like telling someone their cooking isn't just bad, it's not even food. Absolutely savage. And she didn't stop there, because why would she when she's on such a roll? She painted this absolutely delicious picture of what was supposedly happening in Downing Street the night before. While the rest of us were tucking into bed or doom-scrolling through social media like normal people, Starmer and his team were apparently engaged in a frantic ring-around trying to shore up support among Labour MPs. Not strategising about NATO, not brainstorming solutions for the cost of living crisis that's squeezing British families harder than a tube carriage at rush hour, not even thinking about how to re-industrialise Britain with cheaper energy. Nope, just good old-fashioned political survival mode, desperately trying to keep his own MPs from jumping ship. And honestly, the imagery is chef's kiss. Can you imagine it? Phone calls at midnight. Please don't vote against me, Dave. Remember that time I supported your constituency funding? No? Well, how about now? It's like watching someone try to plug holes in a sinking boat with their bare hands while insisting everything's fine and the water's just for decorative purposes. But here's where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't just Badenoch having a go for the sake of it. There's actual substance behind the savagery, and it all centres around one name that's been haunting Labour like a particularly persistent ghost: Peter Mandelson. Right, so for those who need a quick refresher or have been living under a rock, which fair enough, it's been quite cosy under there lately, Peter Mandelson is Labour royalty, former cabinet minister, EU Trade Commissioner, absolute political heavyweight, and someone who's been around Westminster longer than most of the furniture. He's also just been appointed as the UK's ambassador to the United States, which would normally be a congratulations, best of luck sort of situation. Except, and this is a massive except, Mandelson has some rather eyebrow-raising connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, that Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender whose name makes everyone collectively uncomfortable and whose address book read like a who's who of people who should definitely have known better. Flight logs showed Mandelson flew on Epstein's private jet twice in the late 90s and early noughties. He's also been photographed at Epstein's New York townhouse. Now, to be absolutely fair, Mandelson has stated he had no knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities at the time, and there's no suggestion of any wrongdoing on Mandelson's part. But, and this is where it gets politically explosive, the optics are, how shall we put it delicately, absolutely horrendous. In an era where everyone's supposed to be super careful about associations and due diligence, appointing someone with documented connections to one of the most notorious criminals in recent memory to represent Britain in America is, shall we say, a choice. It's like showing up to a vegan dinner party with a bacon sandwich. Technically, you're allowed to do it, but everyone's going to have questions. So naturally, Starmer had to say something, didn't he? You can't just appoint someone controversial and then pretend nothing happened, like it's some minor administrative hiccup, which brings us to the apology that absolutely nobody found satisfactory. Keir Starmer, bless him, did what politicians do when they're backed into a corner and the exits are blocked. He apologised, sort of, in that uniquely political way where you acknowledge something happened while simultaneously not really accepting responsibility for it. It's an art form, truly. His apology essentially boiled down to, look, we should have communicated better about this appointment, which is absolutely wild when you think about it, because the problem isn't really that they didn't communicate it well, the problem is that they did it in the first place. It's like setting your neighbour's garden on fire and then apologising for not sending them a text warning first. The communication wasn't the issue, mate, the arson was. But Starmer's team tried to frame this whole thing as a messaging problem, not a judgment problem, as if the British public looked at this situation and thought, you know what, the appointment is fine, we just wish we'd heard about it differently. Absolutely delusional. We're not upset about how you told us, we're upset about what you're telling us. And Kemi Badenoch, well, she took one look at this apology and basically said, yeah, that's not going to cut it. And honestly, she's got a point that's sharper than a well-tailored suit. This is where Badenoch really turned up the heat and showed why she's become such a formidable opposition leader. She didn't just reject Starmer's apology, she completely dismantled the logic behind it, piece by piece, like someone taking apart flat-pack furniture to prove it was assembled wrong in the first place. Her core argument was devastatingly simple. The apology was not good enough because it completely missed the point. Starmer was apologising for the wrong thing. He was sorry about the process, the communication, the timing, everything except the actual decision itself. And that's where the whole thing falls apart like a soggy biscuit in tea. Badenoch essentially said, if you genuinely thought this appointment was the right call, then why are you apologising at all? And if now you think it was the wrong call, then why hasn't Mandelson been unappointed? You can't have it both ways, Keir. You can't say, I'm sorry about how this looked, while simultaneously defending the substance of what you did. That's not leadership, that's political gymnastics, and not even the good kind with high scores. She pointed out that the real issue isn't just one controversial appointment, it's what it reveals about Labour's priorities. While ordinary Britons are struggling with energy bills that could fund a small space programme, while families are choosing between heating and eating, while businesses are collapsing under the weight of regulations and costs, the government was expending precious political capital defending Peter Mandelson's flight history. It's like watching someone rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic while insisting they're focused on navigation.
And you know what makes this even more delicious? The context in which all this is happening. Because this isn't an isolated incident, this is part of a pattern that's been building for months. Let's zoom out for a second, because this Mandelson saga doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a much larger narrative about Starmer's leadership and Labour's priorities since taking power. And that narrative, it's not exactly reading like a best-selling success story. Labour came into government with massive promises. They were going to fix the economy, sort out the NHS, make energy cheaper, get Britain building again. The works. Proper transformational stuff. And yet months in, what are we talking about? Controversial appointments, internal party management, and damage control. The government seems to be spending more time defending itself than actually governing, which is rather awkward when you're, the government. Badenoch's accusation that Britain is not being governed hits differently when you look at the actual policy output. Where's the grand energy strategy that's supposed to re-industrialize Britain? Where are the bold moves on cost of living? Where's the vision? Because from where most people are sitting, it looks less like governing and more like surviving day-to-day political firefights. And here's the thing that really sticks in people's craw. This Mandelson appointment wasn't some emergency crisis-level decision that had to be made under pressure. This was a choice. They could have appointed literally anyone else. They could have done more due diligence. They could have anticipated the backlash. But they didn't, and that suggests either incompetence, which is bad, or they genuinely didn't think it was a problem, which is arguably worse. So, where does this leave us? Well, with some rather uncomfortable questions for the Prime Minister and some rather enjoyable opportunities for the opposition. The political fallout of this saga is still unfolding, but we can already see the contours of the damage. For Starmer, this is another dent in his authority at a time when he can least afford it. Labour's honeymoon period, if you can even call it that, is well and truly over. MPs are getting restless, the polls are showing signs of trouble, and now he's got his own party members privately questioning his judgment. Badenoch, meanwhile, is having an absolute field day. This is exactly the kind of material opposition leaders dream about. A clear moral issue, a weak government response, and plenty of room to paint a broader picture of incompetence. She's using this Mandelson scandal as a springboard to attack Labour's entire approach to governance, and honestly, it's working. She's managed to take what could have been just another Westminster controversy and turn it into a narrative about whether Britain is even being properly led. And the public, well, they're watching all this unfold with a mixture of frustration and exhaustion, because while politicians argue about appointments and apologies, people are still struggling with the actual problems that affect their daily lives. Energy bills haven't magically decreased because Starmer said sorry. The cost of living hasn't improved because Badenoch gave a good speech. Real governance requires more than just political theatre. It requires action, vision, and yes, good judgment about who you put in positions of power. So, there you have it. Kemi Badenoch absolutely dismantling Keir Starmer's apology over Peter Mandelson, declaring it not good enough, and frankly, she's got a point. When your defence is, we should have communicated better, rather than we should have made better decisions, you've already lost the argument. Starmer's trying to govern while simultaneously fighting for survival within his own party. Mandelson's off to Washington with more baggage than a Heathrow carousel, and Badenoch's sharpening her knives for the next round. British politics, everyone. Never boring, frequently baffling, always entertaining. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Westminster's latest drama, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on, because trust me, there's plenty more chaos coming. I'll catch you in the next one.